Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm about a minute or two late. Sometimes this phone gets more complicated than I can figure out, but we're back, and I'll hold this for a second, then my wife's going to take over. The window has been soldered on both sides, and I've looked it over pretty good. I did find a couple of spots that I had missed soldering, and that's kind of a common thing. There are times when I get this cement in here, and then I'll be cementing the whole piece and then discover there's a spot that I missed with the solder. But I think we're in pretty good shape here. And if there is a spot we've missed, it's no big deal. We can fire up an iron and go from there. This is not something that takes any skill here. And the only reason I'm showing you this is because it is part of the process and my least favorite part. And I'll explain, why we're doing it and the actual way it's being done. Most people have not seen any cemented leaded glass windows or seen it actually being done, and we'll talk to you about why we're doing it. So my wife's going to take over here, and I'm going to go down there. Okay, I mixed this stuff up. We have dogs everywhere, and this stuff is point at this right here, Bird. That's the dry powder that I'm using. It's called Miracle Mud. I don't know who makes it. I get it from my wholesaler. I buy all my stuff from one big wholesaler out in Colorado. And then you mix that up with this chemical, and I just poured it into another bottle because the bottle that I had probably was not in good shape, like that one's in good shape. But anyway, it's not going to leak. And you mix that up and I mixed it here about 4 or 5 minutes ago because I don't think anybody. Can you get that? Mm-hmm. Whoa! You got to hold the camera straight. There you go. There you go. See, I learned that yesterday. Anyway, mixing that stuff up, and I've got it mixed to this consistency right here, kind of a liquidy putty like. Look at that. That's so much fun. All right, and before I take off on this, you can get right back there and you can go through. Before I take off on this, I'll talk about the putty. And before 45 different other stained glass artists jump in here and tell me, oh, well, I mix this and I mix that and I do this and I do that. No disrespect intended. I used to make all my own putty and cement, rather. And, that's just, if you find 100 stained glass artists, they probably have 100 different mixtures. You could probably go on the internet right now and find 50 different ways to make this cement. Because it's kind of a personal thing. But this stuff here, and I'm not trying to sell it, I've bought it a few years ago and started using it, and I really like it. You can mix it the consistency that you want, and it works. And what we're trying to do here, let me tap on this window, Bird. Just that, you got to hold it, so you can't flip that phone. There you go, right there. Just keep like that. Okay, you can't. Lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, the glass. The glass is just setting inside this channel or came here, and there may be an area. There's one that's a little looser. They're fitting tight, but the glass can actually, if you watch, I'm exaggerating this, but the glass can float up and down or move a little bit inside that channel. There's a little bit of room under the face of the lead came or channel, and there may be a little bit underneath, and we're sitting in there real tight. But what we're going to do with this cement is run this cement underneath this lead came or the face of the cane, and it'll smoosh back or push back in around that glass up inside of there. So if there's any void inside there, it'll fill that void, and it'll make this window no rattling. Like if it's going to set up on some transom or in a wall or on the side of a house out looking outside, it's not going to rattle anyway. However, some of these windows are actually subjected to the outside atmosphere, rain, snow, so we're going to seal all that out. And then I think one of the main reasons that this cement is used is it makes this window much stronger. Now this window has not, I haven't talked to you about reinforcement bar or rebar because I would, as I do these little pieces, tutorials, whatever you want to call them, and we can talk about all the aspects that go into all these different kinds of windows. This window's not that big, and I'm going to show you. It's actually pretty solid. See that? And that's with no cement or anything. Now, if you get a window up any size and you do that, you may have a problem. So I'm not taking any chances by doing that. I wouldn't, if I thought by lifting that up I might cause a crack or a fracture somewhere, I wouldn't do it. And of course we don't want to get too wild and crazy with it, but that's just showing you how solid it is. And part of the function of it being that solid is the fact that we have this zinc channel or zinc came out here, which is some really heavy duty stuff, and it makes the window a little more rigid. I've done these windows 56, 57, 58 inches by 33 or so. Now that gets a little tricky to get them turned over and such. You know what? Watch me do this, Bert. I'm going to show them something here. The way you turn one of these over, here we go again. 20 stained glass artists are going to have 20 different ways of doing it. But if I had only gotten, yesterday, I only had this soldered on one side. Well, now that window's fragile and can crack real easy. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to come out here, and I'm talking about if the window was less strong than it is now, had less strength in it. You come out, and a lot of times I'll put a pail. Can you see what I'm doing with my hands here? I'll put a pail, a couple of pails down here if this window's got any size on it. And you come out here like this, and you get this window to a spot like that. Okay, and then you just turn her over and head down onto the pails with it. Okay, and then you come down there and get the window turned around so you can get it back up on this table, you know, and go back up there on the edge. This window is so strong, I really don't have a problem with it. But you'd come back up and get it up there and then come back like that. So I swear, now, a long time ago, I used to be all freaky about breaking one of these things. And I will say this, and I'm knocking on some wood here. I haven't broken a window turning one over, man, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years. So I think it's a little more than luck. You just kind of, after a while, you get an idea of how one of these things, you know, its weak spots, what you can do, what you can't do. And when one of them cracks, it's a little sound that you hear, and that's followed by a real deep pain in your guts because you've got some trouble to get it fixed. Having said that, there can be occasions more associated with the handmade glasses that are very hard. This glass is actually much softer, easier to cut. This glass is hard, and you can cut a piece of glass that had some size to it in the middle of a stained glass window, somewhere in the window, and there may be a tiny fracture or a little tiny crack on the edge of that piece. Well, there's a couple of things that can happen if that occurs. You may never have a problem with it. Or on a copper foil window, see now we've soldered these joints, but on a copper foil window you're running that whole bead of solder because this piece of glass, this piece of glass, and this piece of glass have all been wrapped with copper, and you're making the bead instead of this lead cane being here. The lead cane, of course, is accepting the glass into the channel. Face of the cane, the piece running down the center is the heart, and of course the face or the other side. With copper foil, we're soldering and making that bead. And point that back up here, Bert. There you go. That's copper foil. So all those pieces of glass were cut, wrapped with a thin strip of copper, and then we ran a bead and created our own cane, if you will. All right. So that's when you get into trouble, because if there's a fracture, say even a piece this small, say there was a little tiny crack on the edge of this piece of glass somewhere around here, and I'm soldering, running that bead, and about 9 times out of 10, of course you don't see that crack, and when you come around there with that heat, and that's why copper foil soldering is another game, different than this, you come around there with that heat, and that heat hits that crack and gone, and you'll hear it. It's this little tink, and of course then you're, oh man, you do not feel good. Now, I don't know, somewhere along the way, if people are interested enough in what I'm doing, we may get into how do you get, if I break that, how do I get that out of there? Well, I know a lot of different tricks. Of course, anybody that's been in this business a long time knows all this stuff. And then I want to mention somebody else. On Facebook, there's a guy, I hope I get... well, his name is Victor Rothman. That's it. Victor Rothman for Stained Glass. Now, Victor's been around a long time and knows more about glass than I ever thought about knowing. And he's another guy. You find these guys that are really good, that have all this knowledge, and so many of those guys are trying to impart or pass that knowledge on to other people. And Victor goes on a couple of these stained glass Facebook pages where people are getting into this, or they're hobbyists or whatever, and people ask him all kinds of questions, and he helps them out and gives them a lot of good advice. And he knows so much about the history of glass. And Victor's a big time glass artist. He's worked on original Tiffany windows to repair them. And then prior to Tiffany, a name that all of us in this glass trade are very familiar with, a fellow named John Lafarge. John Lafarge was an artist prior to Tiffany, and at one time he and Tiffany worked together. They later became adversaries because they were both competing for this high-end business in the mid-1800s, late 1800s. But anyway, Victor Rothman knows the history of all these guys. It's just an amazing... I'm so impressed with his knowledge. Anyway, where are we here? Oh yeah, we're going to do this cementing. I get all bumfuzzled and wild, and my head just goes, overloaded with all this stuff about glass and history and the people that are involved in it. I think I'm about ready to do this. So anyway, let's get some of this cement. And like I say, I'll talk to you about this. This isn't any big deal here. I'm just digging some of that out, Bird. We'll just put some of that down there. And what I'm going to do, let's just get up in here. And what I'm doing is, you just don't have to be, there's no learning curve on this. Oh, you know what I was doing? I was talking about breaking a piece. Anyway, if we get really into this and people are interested in it, I don't want to bore anybody with this. I had a fella come in here some years ago, and just a regular guy, trying to make a living, and not a glass person. And so he came in, and I was working on something that was, pretty expensive, a pretty ornate piece. And so he's, I could tell he wanted to know, how much does that cost? What do you sell something like that for? So I gave him the price that this particular piece sold for. And man, he just gasped. And he said, well, how much do you have in the materials? And I said, well, of course, certainly the materials are expensive, and you've got to have a pretty good inventory. Point that camera over there at that pile of glass. That's all we need to do. They need to see it. Okay, come back. Thank you so much. My camera person is fantastic. Indispensable. Anyway, so that's just part of the glass. That's not all of it. Anyway, so I said, you got there's $20,000 worth of material sitting over there. But, on a stained glass window, it's really labor, so much of it. Certainly the materials have a price to them, but so much of this is just labor. And, you're paying somebody to do something that they know how to do, and I guess you don't know how to do, or appreciate their efforts. What I did right then, I'm just doing stuff, not telling anybody. There's a little solder ball or something that is on there, and I'm just trying to get it off there. You see, all I'm doing is just smooshing this or pushing this stuff under the edge of the glass, and you could see where this could get a little boring. Anyway, this guy's asking me about the price of this window, so I told him, well, the price of the window. He goes, oh, man, I need to get into that. And I said, well, that's how I just got into it, started doing it 44 years ago. I'll explain that sometime, too, if anybody's interested. People ask me that all the time on Facebook, but we'll talk about it. So anyway, he said, I really want to learn how to do that, if you can make that kind of money. I said, well, yeah, no problem. So he said, well, can you give me lessons? I said, when do you want to start? Well, I'm off Saturday. So I said, well, just do it. So he comes over Saturday, and I've got some monster, there's another one of those little solder balls. That's kind of common, these little solder balls. So I had some big window right over here, and so I set him up with a couple little pieces of glass, little old drawing, some little simple something, and you give him a place to start. So we're just cutting away, and I'm working on this monster over here, 800, 1,000 pieces of glass over there. He's down here working on his end, and I'm giving him some instructions on how to hold a glass cutter and what to do when you get the piece cut, all of that. So about a half hour into our session, kind of moving around here, I just want to make sure I get, what you're trying to do is just drive this stuff up under the edge of all this glass. And you can hold that thing any way, like I say, the camera part's way back over here. Are you okay? All right. Man, there's another one of those little solder balls. And so about a half hour into our session here with the stained glass work, he said, I want to be honest with you. I said, well, I prefer that. I'd hate for you to be dishonest, He said, well, I got to tell you, this is really boring. And I said, well, there you go. I said, you start and stopped your entire stained glass career in 30 minutes. You didn't waste any time. And so that's kind of the deal. When I first got into this, the first time I ever did this was 1976. And back in 1976, we were not in this resurgence or the renaissance of glass as where it is today, in the place it is today. And back then, it had just started. People, about that time, 74, 75, people had just started to get into glass, interested in it. And back then, of course, I know some of the younger folks won't recall this because they weren't around. Getting one of those solder balls. Let me get that thing out of the way or something. And but there was no internet, no cell phones, none of that. And so I got to thinking. I had been up in Rhode Island and on a little vacation up there. I was in the Navy up in Connecticut, up at the submarine base, and so I had toured up into Rhode Island, and I saw this little church out in the country, and a cute little old white church. And I thought, there was a stained glass window right above the door of the entrance into this church. And it wasn't about, I don't know, 18, 20 inches. I'm just grabbing some more of this stuff. Put it right there. So there you go. 18, 20 inches wide by, a couple of feet tall. And it was a simple design. It was not a religious design, but this simple design. But I remember it was blue and amber, just a gorgeous little window. That's the first stained glass window I'd ever paid attention to in my life. I think I was 27 years old. Something like that. Right about there. But that's pretty close, I think. Yeah. Be 75. Yeah, 28, 27. And so I saw that window, and I don't know, something clicked in my head, and I thought, ooh, boy, I wish I could do that. And I'd been fiddling around drawing, and I wasn't that great at drawing, and fiddling around. I got into macrame. Well, you want to spend a whole bunch of hours, and you're trying to sell your work and make enough money to buy some more materials, and you work for about 6 hours and get $15 for the macrame planter basket. So, anyway, so I went back home, and I thought, oh man, what do you do about getting some stained glass supplies? How do you do that? So those people that have any age on them, which is probably maybe a few people watching in this, there was a catalog back then, this great big catalog, nearly the size of about half the size of a newspaper. It was called the Whole Earth Catalog. And that was for hippies and people in communes and stuff to gather up all the materials you needed to exist with, off the grid. Of course, that term off the grid wasn't a term back then. Anyway, so, and whatever you were looking for, that was kind of like the internet of the day. It was a book, magazine looking thing, maybe an inch thick. And if you wanted to build a outdoor bread oven, it told you how to do that. And it was a place, procuring tools, you could get anything you wanted. So I found a company, they're still in business, by the way. The name of the company, I'll never forget, is Whitmore Durgan. So I found this company, Whitmore Durgan, and Back then, you had to write anybody and ask them for a catalog. You didn't, or call them. They had 800 numbers. So anyway, I called and got a catalog, and I didn't have much money, very little money, and so just out of the Navy. So I ordered. I'll never forget the amount because it was a considerable amount of money for me, and to throw off and throw that kind of money around on some, whim. But this glass thing was in my head. Can you see what we're doing there? Isn't that cool? Now we're getting all this stuff up under here. Pull my sleeve up a little there. Get this stuff up under here, and I'm just pushing it up under that. Now, of course, there's all kind of people that do glass, and they're telling me, well, you should use this to push up under there, and you should use that. Well, okay. I mean, hey, if there's a better way, just put it on my Facebook page, and I'll definitely listen, because I'm open to anything and everything. I'm not old and stubborn. I'm old, but I'm not stubborn. Well, I don't think. Bird may not agree with that. But anyway, so I ordered $44 worth of glass, and I remember I got a few pieces of amber glass like this, and some lead like this, and a lead knife. And I've got one back behind me. I don't want to grab it with this dirt here, this stuff on my hands. But and guess what? You get to do this on the other side too. This is not my favorite part of this. All right. So anyway, and you got a glass cutter, and I remember there was a little pamphlet that came with it, about 11 pages, how to do stained glass. And I don't remember who wrote it or any of that. So it told you how to hold the glass cutter. And there is a special way you hold the glass cutter. And of course, nowadays they've got all these pistol cutters and all this color, and super cutters and oil cutters and this cutter and that cutter and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, back then there was none of that. And it was a glass cutter. And maybe, I don't know, another day or two, or when I get ready to start this next job, which as quick as I get off this, we go to the next one. I'll cut some. I'll have the bird come out and operate my little camera here, and we'll talk about how we start these jobs up, cut some glass, laying it out. For those interested, if I notice that people don't care about it or not interested in it, then we won't bother with it. I'm just going to keep going. Now, I'm nuts for it, so, and I don't expect anybody to be this crazy, except a few people. Anyway, and if you're that crazy about it, you're actually in some studio right now working, not listening to some old man jabber about glass. Anyway, so for some odd reason, I started messing around with that glass cutter and that amber glass, and holding that glass cutter. And let me tell you, the way they wanted you to hold that glass cutter was a hassle. And I thought, I'm going to learn, So I just kept working to hold that glass cutter the way they wanted you to hold that glass cutter. In that, I guess if that paper had told you to hold it in your mouth and cut the glass with your head, I'd been doing it that way. But anyway, whatever they said is what I did. So I figured whoever wrote it was smarter than I was. And so, anyway, something clicked in my head, and I just decided, wow, I like this. I don't know what it is, but I like it. And man, I wasn't producing, nothing like this. And maybe another year and a half from now, I'll be looking back at this thinking, man, I'm doing a lot better. And you do. If you do something as much as I do it, every day, all day, you just can't help but get better if you want to. But you can't be in this business for as long as I've been in it and not get better and not want to get better. Heck, I want to get better every day. I want every piece to be better than the piece that was before. And for the most part, they are. I'm into it. So anyway, fortunately for me, I lived out on this lake down in southern Oklahoma, and there were a couple across the street from me that owned this real nice restaurant that they built. He built it. And these people were just geniuses about whatever they touched worked. And they weren't wealthy, but they were smart. It was a husband and wife. And they built this restaurant. It's called Fireside Dining. It's still there. Now, they sold it way back in 1982 to a couple down in Oklahoma, and everybody that lives down in southern Oklahoma knows about Fireside Dining. It's just a fantastic restaurant. Always has been. Still is. Only 2 people have owned that restaurant since 1976. So anyway, they lived across the street from me down near this lake. And the restaurant, of course, was just about 100 yards over from their house. And so I'm kind of I don't know how to say this. Anyway, I was making a lot of noise about something. So I was so freaky in the glass that, heck, I wasn't doing glass for about 4 or 5 weeks. And I'm letting all the neighbors know, little Tiffany here. Anyway, so they got a hold of me. I had spoken to them, but I didn't know them. And they had opened the restaurant in 76. I think maybe 76. And this was the same year they opened the restaurant. And man, that thing was a home run. That restaurant, you couldn't get, they didn't take reservations. And they were open 5 days a week. They opened at 5 o'clock, I think it was. It might have been 5:30. Anyway, and Friday and Saturday night, you couldn't even get in the parking lot of that place. The food was fantastic. And they did something a little different. They served nothing but prime beef. Not choice, but prime beef. And they had a chef that, man, that guy could really produce some fantastic seafood, chicken, steak, all that kind of stuff. And people down in that part of the state had not come across anything like that. And the restaurant was gorgeous. I tell you what, right now, if you go to, they even have a Facebook page, Fireside Dining. Go to Fireside Dining. It's down in southern Oklahoma. Look at that restaurant. Just stunning. Beautiful. It was modeled after a Colorado ski lodge. And so they wanted me to, they got a hold of me and said, "Oh, we hear you do stained glass." And I said, "Yeah, I do stained glass." And they said, "Well, we want you to build us a skylight for our house." So, this is goofy. So anyway, I said, "Oh, yeah." Say, "Well, we've got a bunch of glass that we bought out of this old church they tore down and built a new church. And we want you to build it out of that glass." I hope everybody's seeing what I'm doing here. I'm just rolling along here. We'll go here till we run out of this putty. Now I have to mix up some more, and then I won't bore. Well, if you're bored, heck, you're already gone. And if you're not bored, must I have a lot to do? I don't know. Anyway, so I built this skylight. Now, this is where it gets really good. So this skylight was bigger than this window here. And, of course, I didn't know how to do anything but lead. And nowadays, if you go take a stained glass class in some stained glass craft store or hobby shop or whatever, they all teach copper foil because lead is just harder to do. And man, heck, just the soldering's harder to do because as a hobbyist, if you first jump into lead, you're just melting lead all over the place and having all kinds of trouble. And then getting the lead to fit under this came and all of that, where it's much easier with copper foil because you just cut into pieces and wrap them with it. Heck, anybody can wrap foil around a piece of glass, and then you got that half a dozen pieces in this hobby piece that you put together, something kind of simple, and then you're soldering, and it's what do you expect? It's your first piece. I'm here to tell you that I was no Tiffany when I started out. So anyway, so I built this skylight. Well, I'm a little slow on the uptake now and then, and I didn't think about the fact that this skylight elevated above the floor is going to be horizontal. So I'm getting up there with this skylight, and I think I wasn't even smart enough. I swear that skylight had a lead perimeter around it. Well, now, anybody knows anything about lead knows it's soft. So I'm trying to get this skylight up, and there was not a frame for it, so I'm going to have to figure out a way to hang it. Well, that thing was bending and going everywhere, and so we quickly decided that wasn't going to work. And they ended up taking that skylight rather, and just actually putting it into some window. And it was nothing. It was just some lines going, X lines, no design much to it. And that was actually my first job. And, of course, right out, just failure, total failure. So, I don't know. I wasn't discouraged by that. So, I started in my shop, my little garage across the street from them. and across from the restaurant, I started building these little small pieces. I don't want to call them sun catchers, but little small pieces of glasswork like this, with some simple design. And I showed them one of these designs, and they were they were into artists. They liked artists. And I didn't even call myself an artist till about 6-7 years ago. I just thought, I'm still learning. I'm no artist. I swear that's only over the last 6 or 7 years. I've been doing this, I think I was probably doing this 35 years before I ever felt like I could call myself an artist. And I always told everybody I was impersonating an artist. Ha ha. But anyway, so now here's where, man, they just set my career on fire. So I had 2 or 3 of these little pieces. So the wife, I don't use the names of people. I don't think people want their names broadcast all over everything. Anyway, and he's passed away. She's still alive. Lives down in Ardmore. Nice lady. So anyway, they said, Jerry, why don't you bring those up to the restaurant and we'll hang it up in the window in the waiting room where, heck, man, I'm not exaggerating this because they didn't take reservations. They wanted to fill all those seats and they were smart. There'd be 200, 250 people waiting to get into that place. 2 or 3 hour wait. The food was that good. The place was just stunningly beautiful. Still is. Food's still good. And I know a lot of people that still go there right now. And so anyway, you should go. If you're down in that area, go. Woo! Prime rib. Anyway, so I took this piece up there on a Friday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, and they're both up there getting ready to open the restaurant. And they hung that thing. They were so nice to me. They treated me so good. They hung that thing up in the restaurant. And so I went back home, And heck, I worked for a tire company, Uniroyal Tire Company there in Ardmore back in the day, way a long time ago. I got out of the Navy. I was on submarines, and I learned the electrical trade on submarines. So I was an electrician in this tire plant, and that was actually a real good job. I was happy with it, and I liked the company. It was a good company. I liked the people that I worked with, and so I'm out there, just punching a time clock and making a living. And so I go home after I take that thing up to the restaurant. And man, I'm telling you one thing, talking to you guys here is making this job easier. This is some drudgery, actually. So anyway, I wasn't home about 2 hours, and I got a phone call. Said, Jerry, why don't you come up to the restaurant? Well, man, this is kind of a fancy restaurant. You could wear jeans if you wanted to. They did not allow shorts, cutoffs, tank tops. It was a nice place. And people, that's an oil country down there, and down in southern Oklahoma. This is in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And there's some serious money down there because there's a lot of oil people down there. And this was a place where you could go and dress up. So, man, they had people there that really dressed up. I didn't know any of these people. Shoot, I just got out of the Navy in 75, 1 year earlier, and moved to Ardmore because of this good job. I was from southern Oklahoma anyway. So I went up there, and she handed me $100 bill. I said, oh, man. She said, we just sold that piece. I said, $100? Oh, my goodness. And I thought, if I'd had I could have had a heart attack. Man, $100. So I started selling stuff up there, and they just promoted me up, and they would never take any money for doing that. I tried to pay them. They wouldn't take any money. And so what I'm getting at is that without them, and they knew everybody, and they would call me up there, on a Saturday night, just to introduce me to these, I used to call them high rollers. These introduced me to these high rollers, these oil folks. And I was intimidated by anybody of that stature, and I got to kind of know some of these people. And I started doing some commission work down there. I got better. I worked day and night, just like I do now. And the work wasn't what this is. You got to learn. And that's what another point to that is that, like anything, if you like what you're doing, you're going to do it real well. That's just the way it works, you know. And if you just don't care for something, you're just not going to do well. You know, that old thing, there's all these old cliches, but if you say you can't, you won't, you know. So, anyway, that's how the business started down there. And, man, I got busy down there. And I did a bell tower in a Catholic church, and I was working in this nice home and this nice home, and these people had, you know, expendable income. They had this is when oil was, heck, I imagine $20 a barrel. These people were doing real well, and you know, they've got helicopters and business jets, and they're flying to New Orleans for seafood dinner and all this kind of stuff, living the life kind of like Dallas, you know. And I got to know these people and work for them. And I've always had this same philosophy. You know, I just work so hard to please the client. The client is everything. The customer is everything. You know, what they want, you know, I'm trying to make everybody, you know, I'm trying to hit a home run every time I do a piece of work. So, consequently, the business just did really well. And I guess in about a 4 or 5 year period there, I probably did about 8 or 10 years worth of glass work, because I worked day and night. And I was working in the restaurant, working at Uniroyal, and then putting stuff in the restaurant, working for people, building windows, getting better and better, learning and learning and learning and learning. And so that's how the whole thing started. And people, the reason I'm going off on that tangent, you know, I'll tell you what we'll do, Bird. We got enough here. We're just going to finish this side. I'm going to show them one thing over here that's getting that other job ready to start up, and then we won't bore anybody with any more of this today, because I got to turn this thing over. And, well, actually, I have to clean this side up a little bit before I turn it over. But anyway, you know, not much tutorial here. This is just elbow grease. You know, but one thing about standing on your feet working all day and doing this kind of work is that I'm 72. At my age, you know, well, I'm just happy to be working, and it keeps me going big time. So anyway, about 3 years went by. Business was just going to town. So their business and my business. So I'm still working at the tire plant, being an electrician. You know, and I kind of miss some of that stuff, because oh man, some of those folks down there that in that tire plant are just salt of the earth. Great people, fun people. I had more fun. I did a lot of work. Got a promotion down there and started taking care of computers and all this, that, and other. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, one afternoon, I got a call from the couple that owned the restaurant. Said, why don't you come up to dinner tonight? We want to talk to you. I thought, ooh, anytime somebody wants to talk to you, generally not very good. You know, so I thought, and I'm all apprehensive about headed up to the restaurant and all that. So said, and I think it was on a Sunday, so it was quieter on Sunday. You couldn't do anything on Friday and Saturday. Look here, boy, there's a big ball right there. Bird, yeah, I got it off there. Here, I should get that. That's just a little solder ball there. Got it out of there. Look, you got that. Mm-hmm. You can hold that thing on the side here because the camera's up here. There you go. Anyway, you got it. You can come back up here. We've seen it. All right, thank you. You're doing a good job. Your hands get tired. I won't be much longer. And then I'll get off this thing and talk about this drawing over here. So anyway, that's how. I wouldn't be going off on this, my life story here, if I didn't have so many people saying, how did you get in? How did you get in? How did this? How did that? And how this happened. So anyway, so they called me up there and said, well, we had this wonderful dinner, of course, you know. And they said, well, we just cut to the chase here. We want you to go in business with us. And I thought, oh man, I don't have any. You know, first thing I thought was, I got $2,500 in the bank total. That's it. And a mortgage and a car payment. And I don't see how this is going to work. You know, I said, well, you know, I got to be upfront with you. I don't have any money to invest. So, oh, you don't need money. Well, I was thinking, why did they need money from me? That thing was a gold mine. So they said, I want you to go in business with us. So that's what happened. I went into business with them and ran the restaurant for them. and they kind of took a nice little needed break. And they loved Colorado, so they used to go to Colorado quite a bit, go up to Durango and all that, and I'd run the restaurant. And I got to, and I should preface by over the last year or year and a half, I started going up there on Friday and Saturday nights helping them out because the place was just a mob scene. And so I started going up I wasn't expecting anything, just go up and help them out because they were just swamped. I mean, they're not going to just ask you to help them out in the restaurant without some sort of background there. So I'd go up and help them out. I'd get up there about 5:30 with them, and here comes the swarm. I mean, by 5:30, people are waiting to get in. And so I'd help them run the register, run the front door, talk to people out front, tell them, we're going to be another hour, going to be another hour and a half. And I'd always been kind of, on the sidelines, and I had some nice pieces of glass hanging in the windows. I did a bunch of glass work for that place, and there's a sign on the front door of that restaurant that I gave them as a gift. It says Fireside Dining. It's a glass sign, really beautiful sign. It would be pretty today. And I just that was a real beautiful piece, and it's still there, that sign. There's a few other pieces in there, pretty pedestrian glass work, because back 40 years ago, you're not doing these major league pieces. And if I, could go another 40, I'd be doing some high-powered stuff. But we're not going to make another 40. I'm hoping to make another 4. So anyway, that's how the thing started. I got up there with them, and I stayed with them about 3 years, and then I went off on another deal on my own. But they really, if it were not for them, I probably would not be standing here. Because they elevated me to a position that was actually well beyond my capability to be in at the time. And one thing about sophisticated clients is they just know the difference between good stuff and stuff that's not so good. So, man, I had to step my game up big time. And I worked day and night trying to get good at this. And most certainly I wasn't doing as good as I am now, because some of this is just sheer years and years and years of doing this kind of stuff to get better and better and better. And you have to demand a lot from yourself. If you're going to really do something and make a mark, then you've got to demand from yourself, nothing short of just the absolute best you can do with everything. And even the small pieces in here. I don't know, it's just in my head. But the small things in this shop that I produce, even the small stuff, I put the same effort into that stuff that I do a big one like this, or this is kind of somewhere between a small one and a big one. This is a medium. I mean, this is window didn't put itself together. This was not an easy window to do, simply because of all these straight lines. And so anyway, you just have to demand it from yourself, and you get I was talking about reputation in a video yesterday. You build a reputation. That's your mark. And people get to know you, and they want a part of that, because so many people are in businesses they're just making a living, and I understand that, but I'm just so fortunate to be in a business that I just love, I love doing this. And people get all hooked up in your enthusiasm. And I don't need anybody to pump me up. If I get pumped up anymore, I'll be bouncing off the ceiling in here. And man, I'm telling you, I have a cardiologist. I got this doctor, that doctor. I told my cardiologist and my regular doctor, who is, oh man, nicest lady I know, next to my wife. And I told him, I said, this is money for an old man. This is money, not money. This is medicine that money can't buy. You get this kind of stuff going on, and people want what you're doing, and they're happy about it. And my buddy, people must think I'm kin to this guy or something, but I'm so impressed with Scott Riggs. I keep saying that. And I just get on Facebook and look at this work from this guy, and I've told him, posted to him yesterday, and we kind of go back and forth with a little bit of talking. Neither one of us have that much time. And I told him I'm channeling him. And maybe, we just have the same philosophy about what we're doing. And it shows in his work. If you look at his lamp work, Facebook, Scott Riggs, if you look at his lamp work, man, that's not somebody knocking stuff out. That's somebody that loves every single piece of glass he works on. And he works so hard just working on the colors and procuring what he needs to do the work. I love that attitude. I love that enthusiasm. And it's just and he's got some videos on his Facebook, and that's where I discovered him, on there. And he's so good. And I thought, oh man, I would like to just talk to him. So I post a couple of things here and there. And he's very approachable, very down to earth. I don't know. I don't have any ego about this stuff because there's too many people that are, so much better than I am, and I'm just trying to get better. But, boy, this is coming out. Woo! I'm getting under all this stuff. Now, what I'll do is just massage this thing till boy, you know what? At my age, my hands are, I don't know how long this will hold up, but my hands feel like vice grips, no shaking or anything. Now, the first morning I get up and my hand's shaking, that's the end of that career, because you really got to have a steady hand to cut this glass, get it to fit. And I don't do a lot of grinding now. We, of course, have a grinder. Point at that thing right there, Bird. Thank you. That's a grinder. And the less you use that, the better cutter you are. If you're a real good cutter, then all you're doing with the glass there is just kind of cleaning up the edge of it. If you're doing this as a hobby, what you want to do is work real hard to get off that grinder as much as possible and make these cuts to the point where you just clean them up just a little bit. Maybe an edge here, maybe there. And but that comes from time, The better a cutter you get, the less grinding you do. Actually, the more of these things will go together. And I'm thinking on this window right now. I'm trying to think. I think in this entire window, man, I'm not sure. I don't think I had to cut a single piece twice. No, I did. Yeah, I got mixed up one time. I think it was right here. And I swapped. I took my little pattern and I cut this color here out of that sheet. That's the only mistake I made, and I had to just toss that. But when you can put together a window, this is not a real complex window. It's difficult, but not complex. If you can do this whole window and, cut one or two pieces over again, man, that's serious. That's good. That's what we're looking for. And I'm saying again, I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you, that's what you got to be shooting for if you're into this. And if you really get freaky into it, and some people do, that's what you're looking for. Less grinding, more cutting. Okay, now I'm going to just show one little thing here. We've got this smooshed up under here. I'm going to get up in these sometimes they'll get away from me here in these little corners. Up in here, see, up in there. Now, think about this. When I clean this thing up, and I'll show you a quick cleanup here. We're not going to clean the whole thing because I probably ran off enough people already. Probably about 3 people on there now, if there's that many. And we're not trying to have an audience. I'm just trying to show everybody how happy you can be when you're doing something you love. Anyway, and explaining this process too. We've got to turn this thing over and do the other side, but I'm not going to do that in front of you. I'll just let that go a minute. Anyway, I've got all these little old tools and stuff. So you're going to just come back down here and you just clean this stuff out like this. See here? Clean that out, clean that out. I'm going to do just in one little area right here. Just clean that up. Now the idea here, see there, and then I'll take a vacuum and suck up a lot of this. And then after I do the vacuum, and you want to get this off, before it dries. Now, there's a fly in the ointment here in this thing. Oh, isn't that nice? This glass is called seedy. And there's not a lot of seeds or bubbles in this. But you have to, there you go right there. I don't know whether anybody can see that. This cement will get stuck in those little bubbles or seeds there. There's some right there. And what I have to do now when I get it all cleaned up, and you can let that dry, it doesn't matter. I had to come back, and I come back with one of those optivisors, one of those magnifier glass deals, and I'll come back with tip of a little X-Acto knife, and I'll go over every single piece in this thing and get out any of that black putty or cement. Now, see, there's some right. I don't know anybody can ever see that. I mean, my client would see it, but on this Facebook deal, I don't know whether they'll see it or not. Anyway, I got to dig out every little flake of that black. And somebody said, well, you put tape here around it. Oh, man. Tape around it and you won't have that. Well, you want to tape this thing? And then as wild as I'm getting with this, my fingers on here, that tape's not going to hold up. So just clean it up later. I could probably do this whole thing in 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it takes. But see here, we just go around there. You don't want to get too crazy with that brush right away because this stuff's still in there trying to dry. And you don't want to get that brush up under there and knock it out of there. So I just want to brush it away. So now look, this glass, this window's starting to get a little old world look. Tomorrow I'll come back up here again on the Facebook and we'll patina this thing. Or I might just, well, I'll explain that tomorrow. I don't know. I don't want to bore people with this. And like I say, I just know a few people freaky as I am about this stuff, and I do not expect everybody and their brother to go nuts over this like I am. Anyway, here, bird right here. See, we're just cleaning that excess out. And the easiest way to do what you really need to do, and I've got a vacuum over here, is to come back in here and vacuum that out of there. And then I don't get wild and crazy with that brush until I think this stuff is dry. It'll be kind of dry, sort of dry by tomorrow. What I'm going to do as soon as you guys are gone, I'll flip this thing over and do the other side. And right now, I want you to follow me. No, you don't have to follow me. I mean, I'm going to show them something right here. And let me get this bag of stuff out of the way. The next job, I'm already thinking you're like a robot doing this stuff. You don't have to think about this. But the next job is an Irish cross. And all my drawing, this is the original drawing. I'll relieve you if you want to, Bird. I bet you're tired. Thank you. I appreciate it. You did a very nice job. All right. This is the original drawing for the Irish cross. And say, well, that doesn't mean anything to me. Well, on my Facebook page, maybe 2, 3, 4 days ago, let's see this thing. You can see this window. It's a great big window. And this is just the centerpiece. And you know what? I'll tell you I won't do it today, but I'll tell you a real interesting story why I don't have the whole window drawn up here. I only have this heavy duty piece here. That was that drapery glass. Let me grab this piece of drapery glass real fast. All right, here we go. So if you guys will go on that Facebook page and look at that Irish cross that's 3 or 4 days, you can't miss it. It's huge. And this is this drapery glass, and that's the glass that I put in this rose. And this is the original drawing, and I built that window on top of this drawing. So, and I cut all those pieces one at a time, here. And I made, some changes here and there. And I remember, I'm going to tell you this real quick. So, see this area right here, right there. I'm working on that one afternoon, and so just this section right here, I had the Vikings up here. We're in Minnesota. I had a Vikings football game on, and it took me the entire Vikings football game to do that little section right there. But look at that glass. Now I hope you can see. Whoa. Now you can imagine. Good night. Look at that. You can imagine what that rose looks like. Well, you can see it on my Facebook page. Of course, nothing does justice to these things. You ought to see it in real life. Just a gorgeous window. Anyway, and I'll explain to you why this when it's a huge window. Normally I draw the whole thing all at one time, But this I drew separate, and it's a real interesting story of why I drew that separate. Anyway, I think what we'll do here is pull the plug on this. I don't know how long I've been going at this. We'll pull the plug on this here today. And what I'm going to do, and I wanted to get that Irish cross out for you because as soon as I get this done, and here in the middle of the United States, it's about 5 minutes to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But I'll get this done, and by the time I get this other side done, I'll probably be out of gas for this thing. I don't know, I get a second wind. And I'm going to start drawing this thing up, and it's 49 by like 20 inches. So this is, of course, too big. But it's kind of I'm going to take off on a similar theme. I probably, maybe the rows will be somewhat like that. I don't know. I've got to think about how I'm going to get all that into only 20 inches wide. Then I want to do some border work. And then my client wants a monogram on it, painted and fired. And the Irish cross that's on my Facebook page has a monogram B in the bottom of it, a Celtic B. So yeah, you'll be able to find it. It's on my Facebook page for anybody that's interested. I'm not trying to shove this at anybody. You guys can just hit the next click and go on. And if you're bored, if anybody's bored, they're already gone anyway. So this is for the folks that are, how are these done? Okay, one level. So we clean this side up, we flip it over, and we do the other side same way, and then we put patina on it. The patina, I'm going to use what they call a black patina. The patina is a mild acid, and it will turn this. Now this is already dark. This lead is already dark here. But I'm going to clean this thing up real good. Then we'll paint that acid on there. It's a mild acid. It's not that big a deal. And then it'll turn everything dark. And this thing, look at that. It's already looking like something from the early 1900s, and we don't even have the patina on it. Oh, it's so exciting. Anyway, hey, Mike Clare, how you doing, buddy? That drapery glass is amazing, and not easy to get now. In fact, I got to get on the internet and see if I can find some, because the company that made it is gone. Now, I have some over here, but I don't have enough to do all the stuff I want to do with it. And I'm kind of thinking, this is my kiln over here, and I do a lot of painted fired stuff, and I'm trying to figure out, this is what's called shelf paper. I'm trying to figure out if I couldn't take a regular piece of glass, I should say regular, a piece of stained glass. Now, I don't think this will work, but anyway, I'm trying to figure this out. And I get that glass up about 15, 16, 1700, 1600 degrees, and if I could shove it against that back wall and put those ripples in it, but I don't know. I don't think that's going to work. But anyway, I'm trying to figure that out, because I got to have that stuff. And there's a lot of other people that got to have it too. It's some just amazing glass. Call it drapery glass. And that goes clear back to Tiffany, clear back to Lafarge. If you are familiar with Tiffany and Lafarge windows, or you want to get that way, go to the internet. But they use a lot of drapery glass, and they're masters using that stuff. So anyway, I want to tell everybody, thank you so much for paying attention to this. Big deal to me. Anyway, I'll probably check in with you guys. Maybe I'll probably put the patina on here. I don't think anybody needs to see that. Just paint it on there. I'll show you this window when it's done. Probably. It won't be done tomorrow, because once I get the cement cleaned up here, flip it over, get the other cement done and cleaned, I need to let it sit and dry for a day or two, something like that. And for all the folks that are going to be giving me all kinds of recipes for their cement, I appreciate it. I'm going to read them. Hey, I'm open. You got to come up with a better plan, fine. I really don't want to get involved in mixing up all my own. I've already done all that. This stuff here is good. It's called Miracle Mud, and it's real good stuff. I like it. And but I'm open. I'm no genius. I'll listen to anybody. Anyway, thanks again. I appreciate all of you, and I will talk to you soon. If you got any questions, put them on my Facebook page. And I got so many. I don't know why. I'll say this in passing or closing. Man, my friends list things up about 2,000 now, and about 2/3 of that's people from all over the world, and they're calling me video chats and all this kind of stuff, and I appreciate that, and I hate to, not get on there and video chat. And I was talking to some guy from Pakistan this morning, and man, there's some art. These guys, I talked to this guy from Iraq, and now you want to look at mosaics, go to the Middle East. There's where they make mosaics. Anyway, and we're trying to communicate between their language and my language, and I'm so far behind on this commission work. In fact, I got this commission just a few days ago. I got another one after that here in the last day or so. So, I'm not complaining. I'll assure you. I'm happy everybody's happy. Anyway, I don't have a whole bunch of time for the video chatting or whatever, and I rest my hands by getting on Facebook and answering questions from people. And if I put a like on your thing, I read it, and I appreciate it. And I'm certainly not, no ego here. I'm not smarter than anybody. I'm actually below average. But anyway, thanks again. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.